challenge of Atlas, a new skip was used. Backwards challenge of Atlas. This was different from the old backwards challenge of Atlas. This literally meant that after picking up the key item...
O Poseidon você esquipa com a cabine. Da Medusa você vai com o colecionador ali. É só não matar ela. Você passa direto. Aí o do Zeus você não pega também, que você passa direto com um glitch. E o do Hades você só pula por fora, que nem aquele outro cabo ali que zerou o jogo sem o Hades e demorou pra caralho no Ares.
You went back out of the challenge the way you came from. As for why, there was a 2-minute pre-rendered cutscene at the exits. It was faster to leave the wrong way than watch this cutscene in real-time runs. The worst part about this trick was having to breach the floor to return back to the area with Gorgons. You had to jump on one of the ceiling planks in the adjacent
Nossa, eu lembro do Vitão tentando isso daí também, é difícil pra caramba.
Land on a specific spot, and then jump and attack while having a good enough positive vertical air momentum. You could get this trick consistent with enough practice, but I was still feeling a bit uncertain about it. Luckily, I still got it first try on this run. After that, the hard part was over. However, I played the rest of the way quite slow and safe, since the last checkpoint was before doing the ceiling breach. You could combine fuse jumps with lenient air momentum by preceding the jump with an interrupted air attack. This made Kratos' next jump very floaty, making him gain height much more effectively and longer than normal.
Nossa, ele indo pra trás, mano.
Small movement optimizations were used while swimming. Doing a grab in the middle of a swim dash preserved Kratos' momentum in a strange way, allowing him to move further with a single dash. You could also charge up for the next swim dash while doing a grab. One thing that stands out to me about God of War is how it has such a large variety of different speed tech. Yet another new mechanics oddity was used to save time at the challenge of Hades' pool. Entering and exiting the pool in a specific way, you could have Kratos leap upwards at a really high speed, skipping several seconds of ladder climbing. Since I didn't have to use Rage of the Gods,
antes dele sair da piscina, ele carrega o nado rápido ali, ó. Ele carrega e como ele faz esse pulão, eu não sei se esse pulão sai pelo carregamento dele ou se ele fica pressionando X várias vezes. Porque quando você sai com isso daqui, você ganha uma velocidade, só que geralmente não vai sair tão rápido que nem o dele aqui não, mano. Eu não sei se ele fica num lugar específico pra subir alto daquele jeito, ou se depende de você fazer alguma coisa a mais.
Rage of the Gods against the big Hydra. I could use it now to get past the archer rope in the most direct possible way.
Eu faço, Big, mas não sai tão alto igual o dele, entendeu?
I upgraded Blade of Artemis to
não sai tão alto igual o
level 2
dele, não
since
sei
I
porque o
could
dele
do
sai tão
so
alto.
during various loading times without really losing any time from it. This helped speed up the final phase of Pandora's Guardian.
Olha, delícia matar ele rapidão agora, né, mano? Depois daquelas run lá.
The bridge skip was faster than it had ever been, thanks to fuse jumps.
E sem paredão ainda.
Afterwards, I also skipped the several minutes long pre-rendered cutscene that was placed on the way to the next area. This fuse jump was a bit tricky, since you had very few visual cues to tell if your jumping angle was good, and also at what point it was safe to return back inbounds. Still, one unpleasant jump was worth doing to skip a whole 2-minute pre-rendered cutscene. I had devised a different setup for the Pandora's box skip. I first high jumped over the door leading to the box, and from there did a lamb fuse jump over the walls of the room, dropping into the elevator shaft early. It was a difficult skip for more than one reason, but I still personally preferred it over the older variation with seam walking. I'd taken the time to figure out a setup to get through the vertical spike pillars decently fast. Although I roughly knew the patterns of the spikes, this was still a hair-raising moment since I had to move diagonally through some tight gaps between the spikes.
É que nem ele explicou antes. Quando você cai com o Kratos fazendo algum ataque específico, bem antes dele cair no chão, você ganha tipo que um momento ali que faz ele ganhar altitude. E isso pode ser usado pra meio que uma inércia. Tipo, tá ligado a inércia do DMC4? Acontece quase a mesma coisa com o Kratos ali, quando faz os ataques.
Like this part.
Ele tinha explicado isso daí antes.
The pack of Hades satyrs was dealt with level 2 Army of Hades and Blade of Artemis. I interrupted the last hit of my combos with a block to try to be slightly more efficient. Also, I escaped the fight arena with flash jumps before defeating all the enemies for a minor time save.
Aí ele não matou todos. Nossa, era melhor se tivesse matado mais um, não?
Near the end, I managed to do the harder of the 2 blackout glitches and skipped the Gravedigger cutscene. I had pondered about upgrading Army of Hades to level 3, but it would have probably cost some time overall, since upgrading it to full took almost 40 seconds, and you would have inevitably had to do some of that upgrading outside loading time. I used a very aggressive tactic against Ares. I focused on hitting him with a specific high damage Blade of Artemis combo, and only used Army of Hades as a counterattack to prevent Kratos from getting stunned. Kratos took a lot of damage with this approach, leaving him near dead at a few points, but you would get health refills at set points when damaging Ares, so Kratos was basically safe as long as you kept hurting Ares fast enough. Against the clones, I preferred using single circle swipes, since it instantly killed one. But you had to be careful, since Kratos would hug his family instead of doing an attack if you were too close to them. I mentioned earlier how the late 2012 and early 2013 was like a glitching renaissance for God of War. The ideas from that time were now finally fully incorporated into the routes. Fuse jumps were a great upgrade over the classic Poseidon's Rage jumps, but they were also more technical to use, increasing the run's overall difficulty. While my playing was sometimes too careful or otherwise rough, the run was still a pretty good demonstration of the new routes, with no really major mistakes. Having reached my goal, I returned back to the sidelines, leaving the future of God of War speedrunning in the hands of EXE and other runners.
O Akon ele fez assim, ó. Ó, a rota tá aí, vocês se virem agora.
Around this time, the God of War series finally got its own leaderboard for real-time runs. Some new runners also jumped into the fray, most prominently Sir Sanju, although he generally focused on the PSP God of Wars.
12 horas,
For the
meu
first
Deus!
time since the very early years, God of War actually had an active speedrunning community, even if small. EXE practiced for a few weeks and then resumed doing runs using the new routes. He got his time down to around 1:30 at first, and on 9th of March 2015 he did a run in 1:24.46, just barely taking back the world record.
Boom! O tempo dele não é
1.5 weeks later, it was God of War's 10-year anniversary. Games Done Quick and Santa Monica Studios did a small special marathon event called God of War Done Quick to celebrate the occasion. 3 of the world's best God of War speedrunners were invited to the event, EXE, Sir Sanju as well as me. Or to put it another way, there were only 3 active God of War runners in the world and they invited all of them. And only 2 of them made it to the marathon. It's just a pity that the God of War franchise has in the past been pretty cursed regarding the speedrunning side of things. The very idea to celebrate God of War with a speedrun marathon seemed downright ironic if you knew anything about the history of God of War speedrunning. All of us runners at the time exclusively played the fastest possible categories on easy mode with glitches. The skill set required to perform these runs had very little overlap with the skill set of playing God of War normally. There was no meaningful combat, and large parts of the gameplay were mangled unrecognizable by the myriads of glitches. I wasn't sure if this was really appealing to the core fanbase of God of War.
Essa run do God com glitch quase não tem batalha, né, velho? Você mata uns inimigos aqui, outro ali, e depois só boss.
Maybe I'm just being cynical. Uphill battle for the organizers or not. It was interesting to hear some developer feedback on the tricks. EXE got the most difficult skips first try, and might have even been on world record pace a part of the run, but sadly he made some big mistakes too, like dying at Pandora's Guardian.
Assim, claro que pra fazer os glitches tem que ter skill pra caramba também, né? Porque não é fácil. Mas agora skill pra jogar o jogo e não pra pular o jogo, é outra coisa também, né?
In the end, EXE finished his run in 1:28:26, and the marathon as a whole collected some $3,500 to the Able Gamers Foundation.
Qual do GOT? Apareceu ali?
On 11th of May 2015, EXE was in the middle of a new run that was going great. He had played well and also used some new optimizations, like a better route through the vertical spike pillars.
Olha lá, 1:23. Sabia que não tava doido.
New world record! Woohoo! Oh my god! Oh my
Até hoje, né?
The final time was 1:23:32. The rest of the year was uneventful. But in 2016, a bombshell hit the God of War speedrunning community.
Boom!
A popular Brazilian YouTuber called Victor Kratos started speedrunning God of War. His first relevant highlight was probably this video on 11th of March 2016, where he
Nossa, ele era muito seco, velho, olha! Sequinho, sequinho!
Months, he tried out numerous categories across all the God of War games and inspired some of his hundreds of thousands of subscribers to join in. Many new runners from Brazil started playing God of War, causing the community to explode in size. Such a cataclysmic change brought with it many of the Brazilian players weren't adept in English, communicating mainly or exclusively in Portuguese. The language barrier was sometimes a problem, especially in the communication between moderators and the runners. Some early runs had to be rejected for not following the rules, and in worst cases, insults were said to have been hurled as a result. An American player called Ragno started streaming God of War towards the end of 2016, and he eventually became a lead moderator on the God of War leaderboards. His interactions with the Brazilian community were generally friendly, but he did note that a lot of the runs were captured on video camera with no splits, which took some getting used to.
Reset C é o nome do split dele.
During the next months. The leaderboard's moderator team was expanded, and new run categories were established. Aside the ever-popular Any% New Game Plus, a noticeable subset of the new players were interested in various types of glitchless categories. The community was thriving, everything was good and right in the world. Perhaps the curse had finally been lifted. Around the end of 2016, EXE, who for the past 2 years had more or less been the face of the God of War speedrunning community, stopped streaming God of War. He rebranded his channel and started exclusively doing couples streams with his wife Carrie. I asked him about it for this video, and he said that there were many reasons for this change. For one, he said that he normally switches the game he runs about once a year, so after almost 3 years of God of War speedruns, he felt like change was...
Deu a ideia aí pra vocês? A roupa de vaca então, filho? Ai, ai.
in order. He also said that he finds the couples streams funnier to do at the moment. Regarding the future, EXE said that it's not impossible he might return one day, but only to running the original God of War, since it is his favorite speedrun. I'm going to spoil a little bit of the past future at this point. Since the community had grown in size so much, from 2017 on, there were a lot of new records being made.
Nossa,
the one who finally ended EXE's reign on God of War was Caster GOW, who managed to do a 122 run on 22nd of December 2016. Over the next half a year, he did 2 more runs and took the time down to 1:20:26. For the rest of 2017, 2 runners competed for the world record, Milo Games and the Danish speedrunner Tarixa. They traded the world record back and forth for a while, and in the process the run's final time was lowered to around 1:17. So I thought about which of these runs I should take a closer look on this video. At this point, the route and the gameplay of the top runners was getting really optimized. Most of the runs from now on would contain the same tricks, same navigation, same upgrade routes, only squeezed to a sterile perfection. There wasn't much room for the runner's personality or fun new route ideas to show anymore. However, even in this increasingly homogeneous environment, I did notice 2 runs which especially stood out. This is the 3rd run Caster made in 2017, with the final time of 1:20. His runs from this time showcased plenty of small innovations that most later runners of the game would also adapt. For instance, Caster started the first fight with a plume of Prometheus and then proceeded to use the T1 combo to defeat the Legionnaires instead of using grabs. This was another tactic that only made sense in this specific category. Caster's setup for the first Hydra made it easy to do a spirit combo finisher to it for some extra damage after it was stunned. Caster used a faster setup for skipping the final Hydra fights. Instead of carefully positioning Kratos by using the mast, Caster jumped down early and positioned Kratos during the fall instead. You could deduce where to land by watching where the ropes on the deck were lining up to. It was possible to skip the small intro at Pandora's Temple's yard by high jumping over it. This was a fairly old trick from 2008, but it was only now adapted to be a part of the new route. Instead of Poseidon's Rage, the runner had to use lenient air momentum to gain enough height for the high jump. A new route was used in Challenge of Atlas when doing the first skips there. Caster jumped to the left side of the pit and then backtracked a little bit to hit the loading trigger for the next room, saving some extra seconds.
Lá nos soldadinhos? Big. Oh, carai. Caiu? Alô? Caiu? Será que pra evitar os malucos burlam um tempo de run, seria uma boa estratégia pedir pra todos gravar na tela com uma câmera ao invés de fazer as capturas direto do positivo? Eu não sei se isso ia mudar muita coisa não, viu, Tom? Tá de boa aí? Tá de boa?
Many of the fuse jumps.
Não caiu não? Deu buffer? Pra mim apareceu aqui, bem-vindo à sala de chat. Sei lá se foi buffer na Twitch.
Were optimized further. For instance, the Blades of Hades skip was done using a fuse jump from Ascension, instead of taking up an extra second to set up lenient air momentum.
Acho que caiu, porque apareceu bem-vindo ao chat de novo.
When it came time to do really big jumps and lenient air momentum had to be set up, Caster did so seamlessly as a part of navigation. A normal viewer might not have even noticed that something weird was being done with Kratos' momentum here, besides the usual fuse jump antics, of course. Anyway, Caster used a different route to do the Cliffs of Madness bridge skip. The bridge itself was completely ignored, and the high jump instead aimed to reach the elevator early.
Ele não falou quem criou esse glitch do paredão, né, mano? Provavelmente foi o Action.
However, Kratos still had to backtrack past the ropes to hit an essential loading trigger afterwards. Pretty much all the runners after EXE ditched my needlessly complex Pandora's box skip setup and went back to the ones that Vara had discovered back in the day. It wasn't easy to do since it featured seam walking, but at least...
porque o Action, ele tinha... A primeira run do Action, ele tinha batido o tempo do X por 7 minutos, né? Só que aí não mostrou ali se ele fez o paredão. Eu acho... Provavelmente ele deve ter feito. E aí ele jogou a rota tá ali e você se vira. Ele fez isso, o Action. Aí o X começou a fazer e o Vitão viu e começou a fazer dele também. Eu acho que foi isso.
The last checkpoint was close by, in case of failure. Some high-level optimizations like ladder and rope jumps were slowly but surely being introduced into real-time runs. A single missed jump would drop Kratos all the way down.
Usando muito, Zon.
In my opinion, this run is a good demonstration of the any % New Game Plus route from mid-2017.
E outra, Zon, os caras descobriram a maioria desses glitch em 2008, Zon. 2008 foi 6, 7, 3 anos depois do lançamento do jogo. 2008, cara. Não tinha nem PS3 ainda.
An earnest step into
Quer dizer, PS3 tinha, mas não tinha a versão do GOT pra PS3.
Of both navigation and skips. With his series of runs, Caster spent around 7 months being the world record holder in this category, until Milo Games took the first place in July 2017. The second run I wanted to talk about was the 117 run made by the Rixer. He was originally inspired to learn the game after seeing Sir Sanju play it at the European Speedrunner Assembly 2017. He made a lot of progress quick. In just a few weeks, he had attained what could only be called mastery over the game and its techniques. Due to the high concentration of random or difficult skips in the first section of the game, some runners started calling it the Reset C. To be on world record.
É que, primeiro que os caras são gringos, né? Então os caras já é mais avançados que a gente. Na nossa época, 2008, internet toda podre, né? E lá pros caras já era mais avançado. E lá já tinha os fóruns de comunidade e tudo mais, né? Então os caras conseguiam reunir uma boa parte de pessoas de cada canto do mundo pelo fórum. Era difícil, provavelmente, né? Mas os caras conseguiam. Até chegar um cabo e falar, deixa comigo. Aí o cara foi jogando, fuçando, até achar essas porra aí. Tá, ô Zon, eu não sei, não pegou o começo desse react nosso? Mas você tá ligado numa strat que eu descobri no God, né? Que foi aquele de pular os pau lá das arpias. Aquele do Hades lá, que você pula direto pra escadinha, você tá ligado, né? E foi eu que descobri. A gente tava vendo aqui, cara, esse negócio que eu descobri já existia há muito tempo, cara. Desde 2008. Só que como foi deixando de usar na speedrun, porque foi mudando a rota, foi mudando, acabou sendo jogado pro esquecimento. Então eu meio que reinventei e repopularizei o negócio que já existia. Só que não dava pra saber que existia, porque essas coisas eram de 2008. Pra você achar um vídeo de 2008 no YouTube, ou tem que ser um vídeo com muita view, ou tem que ser um vídeo muito específico. E pra achar essas porra aí de speedrun de God no YouTube de 2008, é quase que impossível, mano.
Record pace, you had to get all the tricks here first or second try. The Rixer had a really strong start to the run, getting everything first try. A new trick allowed saving couple of extra seconds during the big swimming glitch. If you hit the loading trigger for the sewers map and then swam back to the previous level transition while remaining out of bounds, the game would send Kratos to the next map regardless.
Ah, assim que funciona esse
The Rixer used a subtle navigation optimization. Taking out Medusa's gaze would let Kratos cancel out of a roll fairly quickly. It was a good alternative to jump cancelling out of rolls.
Porque na run no NG+,
found a new skip that saved around 20 seconds.
No NG+, eles passam nadando, né, por cima.
Poseidon, you could skip an additional cutscene by jumping around its trigger. As a side effect, the large rolling stone would not disappear from the middle ring, and the player might get crushed by it by accident later. Runners after me and EXE would do the blackout glitch here without any extra setup. They would just roll into the cutscene trigger, upgrade blades to level 3, and then retry before the cutscene has the time to start. Fumbling with the buttons and being too slow with your inputs would be a 30-second time loss at least.
Mas ainda é mais rápido que ficar só subindo da escada assim, né?
After defeating Pandora's Guardian, he was 45 seconds ahead of his previous best time. The Rixer had figured out a new and improved pattern for getting past the first vertical spike pillar quickly and safely. This was a welcome discovery for any future runners of God of War. There were actually two schools of thoughts on how to beat Ares the fastest in this category. The Rixer used the same approach that I had used, where Army of Hades was only cast as a counterattack. But his fiercest rival, Milo Games, prioritized the casting of Army of Hades, using it whenever available. I can't say for sure which is the best approach. It could just be a matter of preference. The Rixer really applied himself with God of War, doing the research, finding some improvements, and in general learning the game well enough to do the world's first sub-118 run, all in a relatively short amount of time. He was so happy with this time that he quit running God of War. Regarding the future, the Rixer has said that he prefers moving on to new speed games, since it's more fresh and interesting to him that way, but you never know if he might return one day.
1:17:57.
Cabrunco.
This is the greatest speedrun I've ever done.
While the Rixer thought that his run would stay as the record for a very long time, Milo Games did a 1:17:40 run around 2 weeks later, just barely taking back the record. Before I reveal the top 3 runners of God of War's most popular and fastest category, any % New Game Plus on PlayStation 3, I should take a moment to stress something important. It is a common misconception among some people that a run like this is easy, simply because it is played on easy mode with glitches. But a sentiment like this couldn't be further from the truth. As evidence, I would like to present to you some shocking testimonies.
It's by far the hardest game I have ever learned, and I have learned quite a few speedrun routes.
I think it's the hardest out of the 3 main games.
The easiest is God of War 3.
Mano,
the most difficult without a doubt is God of War 1 any % New Game Plus.
That's a good question.
A voz que colocaram no Marte. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, Creep, manda pra ele, véi. Ai, ai, ai.
The easiest is God of War 3 any % New Game Plus. The most difficult without a doubt is God of War 1 any % New Game Plus.
That's a good question.
Ai, 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 ai. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, 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 ai. Ai, ai, ai. Não, 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 velho.
The easiest is God of War 3 any % New Game Plus. The most difficult without a doubt is God of War 1 any %.
Mano, eu ouvi essa voz e lendo ali Speed Marte, velho. Ai, eu nem vi o que ele falou aqui. Ele falou, né? Ai, ai. Ai, ai.
Main games.
The easiest is God of War 3 any % New Game Plus.
Não dá, não consigo. Não consigo, velho.
New Game Plus.
Ai, 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 não consigo, velho. Ai, ai, ai. Ei, mítico. Ai, 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 YouTube.
I apologize if these descriptions of the run's difficulty were too graphic, but it was necessary to drive home the point that God of War is indeed a challenging speed game. Getting a time of 120 or thereabouts is not a simple task. Everyone who has reached this time has worked hard to get there. So to all you runners who spent hours learning the tricks, felt the frustration of failed runs, but persevered and got a time in this game only a very small number of people have ever reached. To you I will now collectively impart my highest commendation. Nice. Now the final boss of this video, the current world record run 1:14:24 by Caster. Let's go.
Eu lembro quando o Vitor falava que 1:23 era impossível.
Using the same efficient tactics he had used in his 1:20.
Que foi, Tom?
He got the Hydra 2 skip on second attempt. He got the box skip on first attempt. The big Hydra was skipped quick and smooth. After doing the sex minigame, he upgraded blades and started early swimming to get to Medusa fast. He managed to get a good juggle on Medusa and won the fight quick. He escaped the tutorial afterwards, gaining endlessly regenerating magic.
A run dele foi perfeita pra época, né, mano?
Starting swimming glitch a second time. He swam past all fights and other obstacles in the early game. He skipped the desert sirens on third attempt.
Quase perfeito.
Caster reintroduced this classic skip into the new route, except it was now done without Poseidon's Rage. Looks difficult.
Verdade. Por isso que pararam de usar então, né? Porque não tinha o Poseidon. Aí não sabiam o que dava pra fazer com a Medusa.
Yard intro, followed by skipping the rest of the yard. New skip. Caster introduced Satvara's Pandora's Temple lobby skip into the route. Very tricky to pull off, hence no one had used it
skip também?
Skip into the route.
Satvara, é óbvio. É óbvio que foi esse cabo, é óbvio. Eu sei, eu vejo as lives do Martyr, o Big. Mano. O cara é o pai da speedrun do God, velho. Esse cara descobriu tudo. Tudo. Todos os glitches que você vê hoje foi esse cara que descobriu, mano. Caralho, velho.
Very tricky to pull off, hence no one had used.
O que o Akin fez foi juntar tudo e fazer uma volta, mas quem fez tudo foi o cabo ali. Cladisman. Ela fala, mano.
Prior to this. This influenced the orb route too, forcing Caster to open one extra red orb chest later on. Caster skipped everything in Challenge of Atlas using the same route he had used in his 1:20. He got backwards Challenge of Atlas floor breach second try. Afterwards, he escaped the challenge by jumping directly over the gates, saving a bunch of time. He did the Rolling Stone skip and subsequent cutscene skip on the ladder on second try, possibly biggest single mistake in the run.
Nossa!
He skipped first Cerberus encounter with Black. The sacrifice section was dealt with as
Também não fazia o skip do sacrifício.
After getting the trident, Caster did the big jump out of the area on first try. New skip. Caster clipped out of Challenge of Poseidon from an earlier point, cutting down on all the swimming you had to do. This one was also by Satvara.
Eu tô falando, cara! O Satvara descobriu tudo, velho! Meu Deus! Mano, 2008, 2009, o cara zerou. O cara zerou o God. Tipo, zerou em todos os sentidos. O cara zerou no máximo de glitch que tem no jogo, máximo de skip. Meu
Caster
Deus!
had some bad luck before going to Challenge of Hades. The Rolling Stone he had skipped earlier was still rolling around and had to be jumped over. First half of Challenge of Hades was skipped with a single high jump, as usual. The Archer rope was skipped using Rage of the Gods. Blades of Hades was skipped with a Blade of Artemis jump. Most of the Pandora's Guardian fight was skipped with a log shooting device exploits.
Representando, pô.
Army of Hades tutorial was escaped with 2 jumps. Caster had bad luck with the Rolling Stone a second time while lighting the rings, just a little bit before leaving for the upper
Nossa, eu nunca vi a pedra passando ali no meio da run dos caras assim.
Skips at Cliffs of Madness, including the big bridge skip, first try. The Architect's tomb was skipped without mercy. Finding Pandora's box was skipped like before. New skip. You might have noticed, looking at the leaderboards, that there was a gap of 2 to 3 minutes between the top 3 runners and everyone else. This was because all the top 3 runs had used a fairly new discovery to save a full 3 minutes. It was possible to skip the long pre-rendered cutscene of Kratos ending up in Hades fairly reliably with specific inputs.
Muito difícil.
Hades Satyrs were fought with Blade of Artemis and Army of Hades as usual. Caster managed to do the second blackout glitch too. As a result, Kratos never exchanged a single word with the mysterious Gravedigger character.
3 anos atrás? Mano, o que eu achei da hora é que a speedrun do God não parou 1 segundo, véi. Porque, tipo, ó, o vídeo mais atualizado sobre as run de God é de 3 anos atrás e os caras já fazem de outra maneira os skip, mano.
Type of a hybrid strategy against Ares. He started the fight with Army of Hades, but afterwards only used the magic as a counter-attack.
É, mano, porque a speedrun de God começou em 2005, mas começou pra valer mesmo em 2008 com o Sativara, né? Então a partir de 2008 até hoje foi sem parar. Foi pau na máquina sem parar, sem parar, sem parar, mano. Aonde deu uma pausa foi onde tava só o X, o Ser Sanju e o Akion. Ali deu uma pausa. Mas quando chegou o VK, mano, foi uma bomba, cara. O cara bombeou o speedrun inteiro de novo.
Nothing surprising happened at the clones. He got the perfect luck in Ares refights. And that is the current world record in God of War. Generally top-notch playing, as well as a few daring additions, like the Pandora's Temple lobby skip and the faster challenge of Poseidon's swimming glitch. While it's still not honed to absolute perfection, it won't be an easy run to beat. Alright, that was the video. Hopefully it was interesting seeing how the speedruns of this game have evolved over the years. I'm not sure if I'll continue doing videos like this regularly, since they're very time-consuming to make, and honestly I would rather break games. But if I do continue, the next speedrun history will probably be God of War 2. I'd appreciate it if you left
mano,
some
a run do Castor,
and...
mesmo com muito erro, foi uma run muito boa com o I-14, cara. E tipo, o I-14 só que teve os lugares que ele errou que custou muito tempo.
Told me if there's something you'd like to see done differently. Thanks for watching.
O Shed, cadê o
Will
Vitão?
probably be God of War.
Ah, deixa eu
Hopefully
ver
it
tudo
was
de novo.
interesting seeing
Ó, lançamento do God.
how the speedruns.
Aqui foi o fórum criado. Aqui é a primeira run do Kaba no Very Hard.
Have evolved over the years.
Aí foi 2006, a run do Ball of Snows. E ficou ali por bastante tempo.
Sure if I'll continue doing.
Aqui em 2007, não é nem 2008, 2007 começou o Sativar aqui, ó. Já começou quebrando o jogo inteiro.
Videos like this.
Teve 2008, foi otimizando, otimizou, aí chegou o Collection do PS3. Ó, aqui teve uma pausa, tá vendo? Aqui foi o único momento que pausou a run. Pá, 2010, 2011, 2012. Aí teve um negocinho ali, outro aqui. Aí 2014 voltou um pouquinho. Aí teve o evento do God lá e tudo mais. E pá! Vitão. Nossa, agora aqui foi sem parar, mano. Sem parar até hoje. Se essa linha do tempo que ele fez continuasse até agora, ia ter muito mais coisa. Não foi acertando no leaderboard só run ainda, ô Mítico? Acaba lá, demora pra ver run, né, mano? É, teve isso também, né? 2010, 2011, o povo tava tudo no God 3. Salve, Carlos. Qual que eu acho mais divertido? DMC ou Gol? Eu acho mais divertido. Eu acho que pra mim, no meu estilo de gameplay, de como e tudo mais, eu acho o DMC mais divertido. Cadê? Ah, acabou o vídeo mesmo. Cara, foda. eu ver uma coisa aqui. Power Source Guides. Eu excluí meus guides daqui? Party Fórum. Acho que eu excluí meus guides, não lembro. Poxa, tem outro místico aqui. Chat. Ah, eu falei que eu prefiro o DMC, Carlos, pro meu estilo de jogo. Ó, deixa eu mostrar pra vocês aqui, mano. Cadê aquela parte que ele faz o Mechanics lá? Aqui, ó, mano.
Inside the Temple of the Oracle.
2006, os caras já faziam isso, só que a run foi otimizando tanto. E eu tô explicando isso daí pela 10ª vez nessa live, mas pros cabas que chegou agora. O cara foi otimizando tanto essa run que essa stretch aí, que pode ser usada na Glitchless, acabou sendo esquecida, mano, porque nessa época só tinha N%. A Glitchless chegou em 2013, eu acho, pelo que ele falou no vídeo. E como essa rota não era mais feita, essa stretch aí foi caída no esquecimento, cara. Aí chegou eu, chegou eu fazendo a Glitchless e repopularizou essa stretch aí, reinventou a stretch. Eu falei DMC, Carlos. Aí eu fiz essa stretch aí, reinventei ela em 2017, né? Foi quando eu comecei a correr. Teve a do Hades, será que eu vou achar, mano? 2006 não foi aqui ainda. Cadê? Foi na do Sativara, né? Que ele fez aquilo. É aqui, ó. 2007, cara. Aí chega aqui. Foi no seu canal, né, Big? Que a gente postou? Não, deve estar aqui ainda, pera aí. Aqui, ó. Aí chegou aqui em... há 4 anos atrás? 2019? Cadê?
Você pode fazer tranquilamente.
O Big todo jogado na cadeira.
Na speedrun, cara. Então, aquele caminho.
Cadê?
Que só vai poder. Que vocês viram aí, né? Aí. Glitch só da N-Purse. Naquela corda.
É nesse vídeo, Big?
Eu não sei se aqui, por aqui é mais rápido. Nossa, por isso. E aí, pessoal?
Pera aí. Era nesse vídeo? Era ou não era?
Pra cá. Vamos dar um save state aqui caso eu dar errado.
Foi no meu canal que eu fiz? Mítico, obrigado pela fala, mano. Nossa, 4 anos atrás. Como que eu vou achar um vídeo de 4 anos atrás? Achei. Nome do arquivo, Big 1.
Fala galera do YouTube, tudo suave.
Nossa, olha minha voz de morto. Vou até mutar isso daqui. Travando tudo. Foi aqui? Foi aqui. Ligação.
Com essas primeiras serras aqui.
Nossa, olha minha voz
lá
explicando,
na
velho.
frente. Ou seja, você tem uma.
Caguei,
consegue
vamos ver.
enxergar onde tá, ó, vamos lá.
Aí fui eu.
Muito bom.
Errando tudo.
Vamos lá.
Por que eu não cortei essa porra, mano? Vai se fuder. Olha, errei um monte, velho.
Ó, a gente não consegue, a gente vai pular. E a gente vai conseguir pegar um lá de novo.
Errei pra caralho, velho. Por que eu não cortei? Misericórdia. Olha, travando tudo, PC bosta.
Sério?
Olha lá, errei de novo. Puta merda, como eu sou horrível. Faz usar mais nenhum.
Pulamos
Aí, ó.
aqui.
Consegui.
Ou seja,
Então, mano. 2018, cara. 2018. Foi praticamente 11 anos depois que eu fui redescobrir uma coisa que já existia, velho. 11 anos depois, cara. 11 anos depois. E o bagulho já existia, velho. E o bagulho já existia. Caraca, velho. Muito louco isso daí, mano. Esse cabo aí. Esse cabo aí descobriu muita coisa, mano. Você tá maluco? Digas, Big. Tá louco. É, mano. Cara, mano. Esse vídeo que ele fez deve ter demorado pra um cacete pra fazer, cara. Deve ter demorado muito. Tipo, não só pelos vídeos de 1 hora, 2 horas e pela edição, mas também pra juntar todo o material. Tipo, ele juntou material, pegou os fóruns, pescou o vídeo lá de puta que pariu. Ele entrou em contato com os runners, né? Com o X, com o Marty, com o Sanju. Ah, inclusive, deixa eu ver o clipe do Marty. E ele pegou cada data assim certinho, mano. Aqui, ó, velho. Ai, ai.
The easiest is God of War 3.
Mano, vai!
Difficult without a doubt is God of War.
Ai, caralho, velho. Ai, 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 ai. A voz que colocaram no Marte. Meu Deus do céu, mano. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, clipe, manda pra ele, velho. Ai, ai, ai.
The easiest is God of War 3 any % new gameplay.
Mano, que desgraça, velho. O cara colocou a pior voz no possível, colocou a pior voz possível, só porque o cara é BR, certeza, mano. Primeiro runner que você acompanhou? Primeiro runner que eu acompanhei foi o... Não lembro se foi o Kojiro, da Speedrun de Crash 1, ou se foi o Red Hot da Speedrun do Crash Twin Stunt, Red Hot BR. É, mano. Cadê? Vou mostrar aqui no final de novo?
That was the video.
Mas legal que ele fez no esquema do God, né? Nas cores aqui do God. Aquele meio bronze. Giga Shed.
I'm not sure if I'll continue doing videos like this regularly, since they're very time consuming to make, and honestly I would rather break games. But if I do
Olha lá, o Vertal.
continue, the next
Ah, o Vertal.
history will...
Ai, ai. Bom, gente, então eu acho que é isso daí, né, mano? 3 da manhã já. Caralho, olha a hora que eu vou terminar a live, mano. Deus do céu. Olha, quase 6 horas de live, meu Deus. Mas então é isso daí, gente. Vamos procurar alguém pra raidar? Férico Snock? Vamos ver. Snock, começou o evento. Red Dead. War. Run. Eu raidaria o Pericles porque ele tá fazendo God, né? Obviamente. E, nossa, ó, o Inception aqui. E a gente tá vendo coisa de God, né? Seria bom a gente raidar ele. Dark Viper. Era meia-noite agora há pouco, mano. Fantasy. Será que esse cara tem comando? Será que ele tem som? Se ele tiver som, vamos nele. Ó, AD, ó, AD. Ah, mano, caralho. Mano, cu. Não, Street Fighter não. Chega... Ah, não. Fighter 6, mas não é o 6. Nah. Deixa eu ver o que o Nock tá fazendo. Pô, só pega o AD nessa merda, cara. Tá no Red Dead ali. Mais AD, chega de AD, por favor. JF? Cadê? Isso aqui? Não, tá no recomendado. Não. Vou no Picles. Tá rádio no Picles. O Perix ele provavelmente vai fazer live até 6 da manhã. Só deixa eu ver se ele tá jogando God mesmo ou se ele tá fazendo react, né? Porque ele tava fazendo react de Masterchef às vezes. Caralho, mais AD! Porra, Perix! Vai tomar no Perix! Caralho, quanto AD, irmão! Porra! Ah, vamos mandar a rádio lá mesmo, foda-se. Ai, ai. Então é isso aí, gente. Obrigado a todo mundo que compareceu aí. Tamo junto. Obrigado pela companhia de vocês. Boa noite pra todos aí. Obrigado pelos follows, pelos subs novos aí também. O Dogot, que pegou sub pelo Galaxy. Obrigado, Galaxy. E é isso daí, então. Uma boa noite pra vocês. Um resto maravilhoso de noite pra quem continuar acordado. Tamo junto, o melhor de tudo. Caralho, mas a dicção tá foda. Desejo o melhor pra vida de vocês. Tamo junto e até a próxima. Falou. É nóis. Um dia sai.